Good morning, students. In our revision batch, we are actually going to start with the snapshot book, and we have done the first chapter, The Summer of the Beautiful White Horse. In the same procedure, now I am going to start the second chapter, The Address. This chapter is a story showing the effect of war on the life of human beings. It's a story about a girl who has lost everything but still longs to see the belonging of her mother, how she reaches the address that was actually given by her mother. So, I'm just going to send you the summary for today, and in the next video, we'll start line to line reading of the chapter. So, till then, watch the video very carefully and try to understand the story again. We have already done, that's why I have said that under the revision work. But still, I'm going to send you the video line to line again for all those students, those who were admitted late in the school or due to any other reasons, those who didn't watch the videos earlier. Is the time to compensate your loss. Okay, so there is a story of a daughter who goes in search of her mother's belongings after the war in Holland. The narrator is the daughter of Mrs. S. Actually, the name is not given to us, who died during the war. The narrator went to number 46 Marconi Street to see Mrs. Darling, who was an old acquaintance of her mother and who had removed almost all the belongings of her mother during the war to this place. All this was done with Mrs. S. silent consent, as Mrs. Darling wanted to save her things, which they would lose if they had to leave the place. The narrator had seen Mrs. Darling for the first time during the first half of the war. She had come home for a few days and noticed the change in the rooms. She missed various things. Her mother informed that Mrs. Darling had moved those things to safety and gave her the address 46 Marconi Street. After the war, the narrator visited the address her mother had given her. She remembered Mrs. Darling clearly. She saw the woman with a broad back. Mrs. Darling looked at the narrator searchingly and showed no sign of recognition. She kept staring in the silence. She kept staring in the silence and recognized her mother's green knitted cardigan, which Mrs. Darling was wearing. She tried to hide herself behind the door and refused to see her. She was surprised to see the narrator who had survived from the war. The narrator returned to the station and boarded the train. While in train, she remembered the first time she had seen Mrs. Darling and how her mother had introduced her to her old acquaintance and given the address. After the first fruitless visit to Mrs. Darling's house, the narrator visited the place a second time. This time, a girl of about 15 opened the door to her. She asked the girl if her mother was at home. Since she was away, the narrator decided to wait for her. She followed the girl along the passage. The first thing that struck her was an old fashioned iron hung candle holder hung next to a mirror. Then they went into the living room. The narrator was horrified, as she was in a room she knew and didn't know. She found herself in the midst of the things she has so wanted to see again, but which oppressed her in the strange atmosphere. The tasteless way of arrangement, ugly furniture, and the muggy smell all contributed to arouse this feeling. She didn't have the courage to look around her. She sat down and stared at the woolen tablecloth. As she followed the lines of the pattern, she remembered that it was their tablecloth, which had a burn mark that had never been repaired. Soon she found the hole. The girl poured tea from a white pot which had a gold border on the lid. She opened the box and took out some spoons. The narrator praised the box. Mrs. Darling's daughter said that it was an antique. They had got lots more, and she pointed round the room. The narrator knew very well which things she meant. She remarked that the cutlery, spoon, forks, and knives was silver. The girl laughed. She walked to the sideboard and wanted to open the drawer. The narrator felt perturbed, means disturbed. The objects linked with her mother aroused memories of her former life. At first, she was eager to see them, but now they had lost their value since they were served or sweared from her mother and were stored in strange surroundings. Moreover, they were useless to her in her present state. She decides to move on as she lived in a small rented room with space for no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in a narrow table drawer. She resolved to forget the address. She wanted to leave the memories of mother and the war behind her and decided to move on. So that's all about the general summary of the chapter The Address. In the next video, we will start line to line reading of the chapter. Till then, watch the video and try to understand the story. Thank you and have a nice day.